This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. It's episode 221 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. Shout out to over 33 people in the room to start this show. We didn't even get into any topics yet. It's just the intro. We already got 33 people in the room. Shout out to the chat in the house. Duran Rivera, good to see you, my friend. Carlos Ramos in the room. It's great to have you back, buddy. G Money Stacks in here. Armand, good morning, my friend. Patty in NYC, always great to have you in here as well. And I don't know, I hope I mentioned G Money Stacks, but if I didn't, G Money Stacks, great to have you as well, my friend. And as Duran Rivera says, like and subscribe to the Subway to Shea podcast. If you enjoy what you're listening to, that's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But if you're on YouTube and you enjoy, you can subscribe there as well. You can follow me on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me personally at Ant Rivera86, as you see right there on your screen. And like I said, if you want to listen to the show later on, you're doing that on Apple Podcasts and Spotify by subscribing there. But if you want to be a part of the chat, you want to be a part of the conversation, you are doing that right here on YouTube for the live show, which you can also support the podcast with super chat, super stickers, and super thanks, all available on YouTube. Let's get right into the news of the week. And we're going to start off here. Pete Alonso, Edwin Diaz officially opting out of their contracts. We knew it was going to happen. We all knew it was going to happen. I know Edwin Diaz took a little longer, but we knew it was going to happen to both of these guys. Let's start off with Edwin Diaz here, because, back in 2022, he signed a 5-year deal. So he opts out of the final 2 years of that deal, $37 million, which would be $18.5 million per year. The Mets offered the qualifying offer to Diaz, which was $22.5 million. And he has until November 18th to accept it. But we all know and we all assume that he won't. So with that being said, could Edwin Diaz be out for a contract that would make him the highest paid reliever in baseball right now? That belongs to Hader out there in Houston, making $19 million a year, Josh Hader. And what do you think? And I'm going to ask this. I'm throwing this question out to you guys. Are you willing to pay Edwin Diaz, now that he's turned 32 years old? Are you willing to pay him a little more than what Josh Hader is getting paid, which is $19 million a year? He declines to $18.5 a year. So he's going to be asking, I would assume, between 19.5 to 20 million. Are you guys okay paying Diaz that amount of money? And is he a more important signing than Pete Alonso? I'm throwing that out to you guys, and I'm going to answer some of the stuff here in the chat. I got all you guys moving here. I'm going to say this right now. I love Pete Alonso, but when you look at the situation, and we'll get into Pete Alonso's contract status in a little bit. When you look at the situation, when you look at the status of where the relievers are, where the closers are, when you look at first base and what's available and what's out there, Edwin Diaz right now is probably more important. Not probably. He is the more important signing at this moment in time. And now I know relievers can be Jekyll and Hyde. We've talked about this throughout my entire time doing this podcast. We've talked about it so much, of how relievers can be Jekyll and Hyde. Look at what Aaron Loop did, right? He had like a .65 ERA for the Mets. Next year, he's not good. So it happens. But with Edwin Diaz's track record over the past couple of seasons, 2022, 2023, he was out hurt. 2024, he was coming back from the injury and he pitched well. Not great, but well. 2025, he was back to his old self again. You look at what he did in the postseason as well. You have to also count when they first brought him in 2019 and 2020 and 2021, when he went from awful to okay, and how he reinvented himself and turned himself around. That's important. Not only is that important, the fact that he did that in New York, the fact that he did that here with the New York Mets, super important. You look at the status of our bullpen, the only locks right now are AJ Minter and Brooks Raley, two lefties. You cannot go into 2026 without a closer. Could Ryan Helsley have been the guy to replace him? I think that's what maybe David Stearns was trying to do, but he already has proven that he can't pitch here. Maybe with a second chance, maybe he can, but and all we were asking him to was set up. You look at the other bullpen options right now in free agency. Roberts, and first let me say this, Edwin Diaz, 32 years old. Okay? 32 years old, closing. Here is what's available in free agency right now. Robert Suarez, who's 35. He's the second best reliever on the market. 2.8 wins above replacement. Then you have Raisel Iglesias from Atlanta, 36. Ryan Helsley, 31. Devin Williams. I don't think the Mets are going to take a chance on Devin Williams after what we saw in the Bronx. Kenley Jansen, who's 38. Tyler Rogers, 35, who I actually would like to bring back in somewhat of a role. I love his arm angle. I thought he pitched okay. I think with a little more seasoning in Queens, he can be a very good reliever and setup guy. David Robertson, 41. We ain't going back to that well again. Phil Maton, been there, done that. I'm okay with him in the bullpen as a middle reliever, but not as a closer. And obviously he fell apart during the postseason. But, we don't get to the postseason without Phil Maton, let's be fair. Pete Fairbanks is an interesting name. I think that the Rays decided not to go with his option. So he's a free agent now. That's an interesting name to, whether it's to close or be a setup man. That could be a name that the Mets could be intrigued on. Emilio Pagan, he's 35. Kyle Finnegan, he's 34. Sir Anthony Dominguez from the American League champion Toronto Blue Jays, he's 31. That's a guy that the Mets should be looking at to be a part of the bullpen, but not as a closer. And Paul Sewald, no thank you. No thank you to Paul Sewald. In-house, all we have right now is AJ Minter, Brooks Raley, Huascar Brazoban, the rookie Dylan Ross, and someone from the taxi squad of relievers sent up and down. I mean, you get Brandon Waddell, you could Austin Warren. I don't know who else that the Mets have. Jose Castillo they brought back. We'll get into that later. But yeah, Edwin Diaz is of the utmost importance right now to get done and get done early. We know that Pete Alonso is going to take forever. And I said last week that the Mets are probably not going to wait for Pete Alonso all the way to February to get themselves situated. They shouldn't wait that long. But Edwin Diaz needs to get done. He needs to get done and brought back. Now, I asked you guys, are you willing to pay Diaz more than the $19 million that Josh Hader's making at 32 years old? Are you willing to bring him back? Are you willing to pay him what is necessary to be the closer of the Mets for the next 4 to 5 years, right? We know that probably by the end of this contract, he may or may not be the closer of the Mets. And Tim Britton brought up a good point. I don't know if you read Tim Britton's article on The Athletic, but he brought up a really good point of, who is more important to this team, Edwin Diaz, Pete Alonso. And, if the Mets re-sign Pete Alonso at first base and this contract doesn't age well, where do you put him, right? Obviously, he could be a DH, but then you're kind of log-jammed, right? There's nowhere he can go outside of first base or DH. At the very least, with Edwin Diaz, if he can't close anymore, at least he could be, middle reliever, a setup man. And then the Mets can figure out what they're going to do from there. They're not at this point in this time, at this moment, but they do need Edwin Diaz in that bullpen. I already went over the in-house names. I'll go over them again. AJ Minter, Brooks Raley, Huascar Brazaban, Dylan Ross, and someone out of that taxi squad that they're going to bring up and down because for some reason, David Stearns likes that stuff. Let's get into some of your comments in the chat. We got 73 people in the room right now. Appreciate you all for being here. G Money Stack saying, I hope Edwin Diaz comes back. Armand saying Diaz over Alonso coming back. Carlos Ramos agrees. He says yes. Carlos Ortiz says yes to bringing back Edwin Diaz. Armand with the contract situation, 4 years, $85 million, should get it done with Diaz. I'd do it. Let's get it done. Carlos Ramos saying Sugar Diaz is 22 million times more important than Alonso is for the Mets to win. He is very important. Armand saying Mets should also sign Pete Fairbanks. We just talked about him to set up and get some save situations when Diaz is out. That's the thing, too, is to keep Diaz fresh, right? You have someone else who has experience closing. That's what they tried doing with Ryan Helsley. It didn't work out. But maybe they could fare better with Pete Fairbanks. And we all know that David Stearns likes to, bring some relievers in from Tampa Bay, right? The last time they tried to do with Tyler Zuber, which didn't really work out. But they like to trade with them. They like relievers from there. So maybe Pete Fairbanks works out. Marcos Figueroa in the chat saying they are both important. Pete has to be a DH, though. Let's not underestimate how terrible the team can be offensively. Run prevention is good. Have to score runs, too. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that the first order of business is for the Mets to lock down Edwin Diaz and get that contract situated. Has to be. Because we all know that Scott Boras is going to drag out this situation with Pete Alonso. Pete Alonso, like I said last week, is in a better situation now than he was last season, right? He holds the keys to this time, to this round here. The Mets don't have they don't have this to one up on Pete Alonso this year. Pete Alonso had a great season. He does not have a qualifying offer attached to him. There is going to be more demand for Pete Alonso to get the years and the money he wants. He will probably get at least somewhat close to it. Now, I'm not saying the Mets are going to give him 7 years, and I don't know if any team will give him 7 years, but he will get close to that 5 to 6 year range, whether it's from the Mets or someone else. He's not going to take a short-term deal, and nor should he. Nor should he. Carlos Ramos in the chat saying, if the Mets are about winning, they bring back Sugar Diaz. If the Mets are pretenders and only care about optics and what the fans say, they bring back Alonso. It's that simple. We'll see how they put this team together. Pete Alonso's power and offensive production is not as easily replaceable as people think. Can they replace it? Yes. Are there people out there that can do that? Yes. Can they handle New York, though? That's the thing. One of the names thrown out there, Cody Bellinger, right? That's one of the names that it's thrown out there because he played in the Yankees. But did he do well because he hit in that bandbox? We don't have a bandbox to hit in. That's why offense is so scarce. But we'll see how they handle it. G-Money Stack saying, you're not going to find another closer than Edwin Diaz. He's the heart of this team despite his ups and downs. Totally agree with this comment. You're not. I went through the list of names, right? Robert Suarez is not better than Edwin Diaz. Rafael Iglesias isn't. They're both way older. Ryan Helsley just proved that he's not. Devin Williams was one of the best closers until Pete Alonso took him deep, and he hasn't been the same since. Kenley Jansen was one of those names, but he's 38 now. And everyone else is really not a closer outside of Pete Fairbanks. Maybe Emilio Pagan can close. Obviously, Kyle Finnegan, but not to the extent of what Edwin Diaz has done. Armand saying Pete Fairbanks is a free agent since his club's option was declined by the Rays. Thank you for that. I wanted to just be clear and make sure that was correct, and that was. And he also says Nimmo should be the everyday DH, which I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And that's the problem now you're going to come up with. You don't want the Yankees problem where they have 4 or 5 DHs on the team. I think, and I agree with Armand, that Brandon Nimmo should be an everyday DH. I agree with that. He should be. He has a hard time out there in left field, we've seen. His body is not holding up. I love Brandon, but man, he's got to, we got to get him more DH opportunities. And then if you clog that up with Pete Alonso, we have an issue. Although you can do the lefty-righty situation, and that could work out for now. But both of those guys would be then long-term deals. And then you don't have the opportunity to move or sign other players. So David Stearns is going to have to get creative with how he puts this roster together this year. This is a big year for David Stearns. Huge, because if they do not make the playoffs this year, you're going to have to start thinking about, did the Mets make the right decision in bringing this guy in to lead the front office? So let's see. Blunt Thoughts saying, in my opinion, an organization like the Mets shouldn't have to choose between Alonso or Diaz. They can choose to go a different direction, but it shouldn't be because they can't afford them. Absolutely. Absolutely. There should be no choosing between. But what we've heard in the press conferences, right, from Pete Alonso, what we've heard from David Stearns, it doesn't seem like the two are on the same page. Even with what Steve Cohen said during FanFest, and I think you were there, Hector, for FanFest. They didn't seem that they were on the same page, and the signing of Pete felt a little bit forced. That's what I got out of it. But if the Mets decide to go in a different direction, they do have options. They do have options. And let's get into Pete Alonso, okay? He can't be offered the qualifying offer like I mentioned before. Looking for a 7-year deal. And I don't know if you all read the article from Pat Ragazzo on Sports Illustrated, SI.com. But this is the big quote that I took away from what the article say. Now, take with it what you will, because it came from a rival NL scout. No one knows the Mets more than their front office and what they're going to do. So take this with a grain of salt. Take this however you want. But this was quoted in Pat Ragazzo's article. According to a rival NL scout, the Mets recognize that their clubhouse is in need of a cultural shift following last season's slow collapse. The expectation is that the Mets will float utility man Jeff McNeil on the trade market and let franchise cornerstone first baseman Pete Alonso walk in free agency unless he takes a team-friendly deal, which we all know is definitely not going to happen. For sure. He's not going to take any more team-friendly deals, and I don't expect him to, and I wouldn't take a team-friendly deal if I was him. So it shouldn't happen. But take with that what you will, because it came from a NL rival scout. We'll see how this plays out. I am on board moving on from Jeff McNeil. He hasn't really lived up to his portion of this new contract. And the Mets have youth now. They're going to have a logjam, right? I mean, Brett Beatty's there. You got Mark Vientos. I'm pretty sure Ronnie Mauricio is going to do his best to bounce back. Luis Angel Acuna, utility man as well. Then you got Jet Williams and Carson Bench on the mend. So we will see what happens with Jeff McNeil and Pete Alonso. But I'm all for trading Jeff McNeil, and I want Pete Alonso back, but not to 7 years. It's not going to be on a 7-year deal. It can't be. Not with the Mets. Also quoted in this, don't be surprised if the Mets are heavily in on the versatile Cody Bellinger in free agency, given their need for defense in both center field and first base. Bellinger is also a fit for the Mets due to his ability to handle the New York market, which he showed while playing for the Yankees this past year. That was quoted from Pat Ragazzo's article for SI.com. Now, let's take some of these things here, because Marcos Figueroa has a comment that leads into Cody Bellinger. Pete was one of the few who were clutch. Bellinger's OPS outside of the Little League Stadium in the Bronx was 704. That is McNeil territory. That is a huge concern for me. Huge concern. He's not generational like Juan Soto is. So I have concerns about Cody Bellinger getting somewhat of a long-term deal from the New York Mets. You don't want to log jam center field with Carson Bench coming up. Can they find a better first baseman out there? It's a possibility. Now, let's pretend here for a second that Pete Alonso is not returning, right? Let's, I guess, play devil's advocate for a second? Let's pretend that Pete Alonso is not returning. Okay? How would you replace his offensive production at first base? That's what I'm throwing out to you guys in the chat. How are you replacing him? Here are the options at first base in free agency. Cody Bellinger, who is 30 years old, has a 7 wins above replacement. Then you go to Josh Naylor, who I'm a huge fan of, 29 years old, a 5.4 wins above replacement. Then you go to the Far East, right? Kazuma Akamoto, who's 30 years old. And Muetaka Murakami, who's 26 years old, and can also play third base. And then you look in-house, Mark Vientos, who's the only one in the depth chart currently at first base. Ryan Clifford, still far away. And if you do keep Jeff McNeil, obviously you probably could throw him there, Beatty, Mauricio, so on and so on. But who are you replacing Pete Alonso with here? Are you a Cody Bellinger guy? Are you a Josh Naylor guy? Do you want to try to pry one of these guys away from the MPB? We haven't been successful in the past outside of Kodai Senga, but that's it. So let me get to some of your chat here. Carlos saying, can't do the platoon thing with Nimmo and Alonso. That's from earlier on in the show at DH. Can't do it. The DH cannot be that expensive, and the cost to roster spots. Perfectly fair. A perfectly fair comment. Probably should not. That's where you get into New York Yankee territory, because they got multiple DHs who are making a lot of money, and you don't want to do that. Patty in NYC saying 100% Cohen and Stearns were surprised and embarrassed at FanFest with the fans chanting and booing. I think that David Stearns probably was locked in on probably not bringing back Pete. That's what I feel like. Although it was really dwindling because everyone else had signed somewhere. So I don't know if he was going to try to make a trade or what. But once FanFest happened, I think Cohen was embarrassed and said, get a deal done. Otherwise, they would have moved on. And you could tell that it was contentious, right? I mean, we didn't hear this stuff when the Mets signed Juan Soto. Same agent, Scott Boras. We didn't hear any of this stuff. But when Steve Cohen came out to saying how hard it was to deal and make a deal for Pete Alonso, I mean, Pete Alonso was your homegrown first baseman, getting ready to break a record, a franchise record. and it was that tough to get a deal done, there's just something that doesn't add up there. Marcos Figueroa is saying Mets should offer Pete 5 for 130 to be the everyday DH. If he balks, then you move on, but he should be a priority. I think eventually Pete will be a DH. I just don't think he's going to do it within the next 2 years. I'd be surprised if he does. I mean, he should be DHing at some point. But I just don't think he's going to do it immediately. I think there is some pride, I guess, in him trying to figure himself at first base. We knew the struggles there. He's not the worst first baseman in the world. He's definitely not the best first baseman in the world. He definitely can't win a Gold Glove right now. But there is some value to him being at first base. Some. We'll leave it at that. My guy, Hector Blunt Thoughts, saying that he did a video this morning where he talked about how we will find out if Stearns has complete autonomy this offseason. The Alonso Diaz situation will say a lot in his opinion. Make sure you check out his video on Blunt Thoughts. And I think he's doing a live tonight at 8 or 8:30. So make sure you check out Hector on Blunt Thoughts tonight on his YouTube page. Make sure you're subscribing to that. Marcos Figueroa is saying the cultural shift needed is getting rid of Lindor. He has no arm, and hugging every opposing player at second base makes him want to head kick him. Look, he's just a happy guy. And I think just baseball has changed where, they're not totally, at war with each other, how baseball used to be. Look, how many times have the Mets gotten hit and have not responded, right? Like baseball has changed so much. The Lindor contract is going to be interesting later on, right? We started to see this season that he has struggled with playing shortstop, right? I mean, this was probably his worst year defensively playing shortstop. Obviously, he could bounce back, but he has struggled. He has struggled. I don't think that they can get rid of the Lindor contract. I think that he is very implemented and ingrained on this team. I just don't think he's going anywhere. It'll be hard. I think it's just hard to trade him. It's hard to trade Nimmo. I know you came up with some trade possibilities and contract situations on X, which are very interesting to see if they could do something like that. But I don't know, man. I think it's very hard to trade either of those guys right now. M Easy saying offer Alonso 4 years, $125 million early in free agency. If Boris and him stalls on the offer, then you move on and don't let them keep him from making other moves because you're waiting for him. I think that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to offer him a specific type of deal. He'll take it or leave it. But the Mets are not going to wait around this year. The Mets are not going to wait around this year to figure out what they're going to do at first base. I truly believe that. Patty in NYC saying, buy McNeil, and I say that because his attitude is terrible and it's worn thin, acts like a 5-year-old. So a lot of people agree. A lot of people agree that his anger and the way he behaves on the field and off the field is a reason for him to move on. And his play on the field hasn't been great. He's been an okay and good utility man, but the offense has not been worth what he signed that contract for. Carl Stern was saying, never forget that McNeil got a contract no other team would have given him. How did he thank us? He changed his swing and stayed trying to bat with a golf club. Expletive, Jeff McNeil. I'll leave it at that. So, yeah. Marcos Figueroa saying, if Pete leaves, they should sign Okamoto and then do everything to get Kyle Schwarber. I'd be interested to see how in they are on a guy like Kyle Schwarber to be playing DH. He's not going to play a position. He's going to be your DH, which means that Nimmo, left field, obviously Soto, right field, and they're going to have to figure it out from there, getting a center fielder. And if he wants Okamoto playing first base, we'll see. G-Money Stack saying Cody Bellinger is 32, and if he decides to come to the Mets, there's a slight chance that he'll want a specific amount of years and money. I think he does. I think he wants a big long-term deal, which I don't see happening. Not here in Queens. Not at his age. James Buckley saying trade Nimmo to Colorado. They want him, and I think he lives close to there. I don't know if they would take on that money, especially now that they have a new general manager. But that's something to look into, right? You always got to keep your options open. Marcos Figueroa is saying Murakami is going to be a bust. Dude has a 35K rate in Japan where Ks are low. I'm glad that you brought that up because that is our next topic. Muetaka Murakami was posted by the Tokyo Yakult Swallows. And this is a guy that's been talked about as probably one of the next big, Japanese imports. Great free agent profile from Metsmerize.online.com. So make sure you check that out there on their website because they have a lot of good info on him. 25 years old. We mentioned he's going to be 26 in February, 26 by the time the season begins. Plays first base. He plays third base. He's a left-handed hitter. Won the Triple Crown in 2022 in the MPB. He's got an elite power bat, but as Marcos pointed out about his strikeout rate, not good, folks. There's concerns over Murakami's contact ability and rising strikeout rate, which is 28 to 30% right now, folks. MLB Trade Rumors projects Murakami to command an 8-year, $180 million contract. That's an absolute NO for me. Not doing that. Not doing that. Now, make sure you check out, like I said, the more in-depth from Metsmerized Online. They have a more in-depth, more detailed profile on Murakami. But I want to bring up this graph that was sent to me from City of Dreams at NY Mets fan Ray. He sent it to me, which was created and posted by Gajin Baseball. This is the stats between Murakami and Okamoto. And this is hitting 93 mile per hour plus fastballs or pitches above 93 miles per hour. Kind of similar when it comes to the plate appearances, right? Pretty close to each other. Way more hits for Okamoto. Couple more home runs. Look at the RBIs. Look at the batting average. 289 to 188. Okamoto wins that one. On base, every category, on base percentage, slugging, OPS. And it's not by just a smidgen, right? It's not by a little bit. It's by a lot. Okamoto is better by a lot than Murakami. So I hope that when David Stearns went to go see Murakami this past season, that he also went and did his little research and investigation into Okamoto. Because those are going to be huge, huge deals. Huge, huge deals to deal with. Now, are you interested in Murakami? Do you prefer Okamoto or someone entirely different? If you want someone else at first base, let me know who it is. Josh Naylor's out there. Cody Bellinger obviously can play first base. But besides that, there's not really that much to go on after. But those are the stats there. Shout out to City of Dreams at NY Mets fan Ray for bringing this to my attention. That was created by Gajin Baseball. Shout out to those two there. Now, as we continue with some of the comments from the chat, we have 116 people in the room right now on a Sunday morning. Football getting ready to start. I think teams are playing right now. And you're here with me talking Mets Hot Stove Baseball. Appreciate it. Appreciate you all for being here and being a part of the chat. Let's go into some of the comments here. Starting off with G Money Stacks. We won't be surprised that Murakami goes to the West Coast, unlike the Dodgers, which would be the deadliest, craziest team ever. I'm going to tell you right now, G Money, I am not shocked whatsoever. I would not be shocked whatsoever. Armand in the chat saying he wants Josh Naylor. I think that that's my number one choice if we don't get and bring back Pete Alonso is to bring in Josh Naylor. I always liked Josh Naylor from his time in Cleveland to then going to Seattle. I think he gives you the best opportunity to get as close as possible to the production that Pete Alonso gives you. I think that's would be it for me. Master Flip agrees. He wants Naylor at first base as well. Marcos Figueroa saying, I like Okamoto at first base. He's a right-handed hitter. He's also a gold glove third baseman, which means he can move back and forth. Versatility is important in this day and age, and you definitely need it. G-Money Stacks would also go with Okamoto. Here's another thing, too, and I don't know if this is a big deal for you guys, but having a lineup that is full-on lefty laden may not be the best thing to go with, right? Obviously, Josh Naylor's lefty, and I would do it, but then we'd have to figure something out at another position. And as Duran Rivera is saying, Mets are going to have to move some of their lefty bats. They struggled against lefty pitching. You sign a left-handed first baseman, then, then we're at a struggle here of putting together this lineup. Lindor bats most lefty. Nemo's a lefty. Soto lefty. Brett Beatty lefty. Mauricio's a better lefty than he is a righty. Who's the only righty at bat in there? Mark Vientos right now? And who even knows if he's going to be on the team? So, things to consider. Marcos Figueroa agrees with you, Duran. They are impotent versus lefties. Carlos Ortiz saying, I'd take Okamoto for third and keep Pete at first temporarily. Beatty at second, even though he should be traded to upgrade another position. Interesting. That's a very interesting way to go about it. Armand is saying Murakami's defense is not good at third base and is most likely going to play first. He won't be signing with the Dodgers. Well, thank goodness for that. And how can I forget about Alvey, right-handed? That's really the only two right-handed bats in the lineup. You could probably throw in Luis Angel Acuna if he's a part of it. So maybe Okamoto. Did you go Pete 1, Okamoto 2, Josh Naylor 3 in the order? Maybe that's the way they go about it. Patty and NYC stressed. We talked about this yesterday, Patty. Hopefully the stressing is not as long as it was last year. Hopefully they get some signings done. I assume right around Thanksgiving that we get our first signing here. I kind of wish it was like that 2022 season when they had a little bit of that lockout and everyone had to sign within like 3 or 4 days. I want a free agency that's more NBA and NHL-like. Marco's bringing up the point that option 3 is Soto at first base. We've seen him practice, right? We've seen him take practice at first base. I don't know how good he would be, but at some point he may be moving to first base with all the practicing that they've been doing. We'll see. We'll see how this plans out. Thanks to Carlos Ramos. Don't forget, hit that like on the video if you're enjoying the content that I'm bringing to you. And G Money Stacks, also leave a review on Apple Podcasts or somewhere. You can leave a review there, Spotify as well, and you can leave your comments after the show's over, or you can be a part of the chat. I do my best to get to every single comment I can. A little harder when you're doing the show by yourself, but I as much as I love having guests on, and I've done it throughout the years, the last couple of weeks of doing this show solo has been a lot of fun because I could interact more with you guys, and I really enjoy that. So appreciate you guys all for being a part of this show this morning. We got 138 people in the room. Like I said, crazy considering that the NFL is going on right now. Carlos Ramos saying, do I dare say Bregman for third base just for the righty bat? I mean, honestly, I would. You get Bregman for third base. You move Beatty to second base. since he plays good second base anyway. It's not a crazy idea, Carlos. I am not opposed to it. Blunt Thought saying he likes Josh Naylor, wanted his bat at the deadline, don't really want him replacing Pete. However, if they go the route, better hope Vientos and Alvy have huge bounce back years while also adding more. Vientos already, we know, had that sophomore slump last season. Alvy, you just got to stay healthy, right? I mean, this guy's been nailed in the hand how many times already? And that's got to take an effect. Not only the fact that at the plate, him hitting, but also behind the plate. He's got to catch those balls in that hand that he got hit at so many times. So it's crazy. Master Flip saying Nimmo to DH and move Soto to left field. I mean, I already said I'm on board with Nimmo being a DH. But I do think that Soto is more inclined to move to first base for some reason. Just seeing him every time during pregame or during warm-ups or whatever, him playing at first base, they just don't show that for nothing. They just don't show that for nothing. And continuing with the Soto at first base, Marcos Figueroa saying, Harper was a Gold Glove finalist at first base. Soto should be able to play first. Have Keith give him some crash course during spring training. Yeah, absolutely. You want the best. You want the best first baseman in Mets history to be doing that. G-Money Sex saying Alex Bregman is 32 but doesn't hit for power like he used to over the years. I did mention that Josh Naylor doesn't have speed when it comes to running the bases. Does even running the bases matter anymore now that we got rid of Antoan Richardson? Or not saying got rid of, now that Antoan Richardson has left us for Atlanta? I just don't know, like, how the Mets are going to handle, stolen bases now with Antoan Richardson being gone. But next up here, I want to talk about the Stearns roster watch and what he has done over the past week. AJ Minter, Frankie Montas, both exercising their player options. Montas will not pitch in 2026. Obviously, he's having the Tommy John surgery. AJ Minter will be back. Last season, 1.64 ERA, 14 Ks in 11 innings pitched. His season got short due to that lat injury and having to have surgery. Montas last season, 3-2, 6.28 ERA, 32 strikeouts in 38.2 innings pitched. He started the season on the IL and just as well finished the season on the IL. And like I said, Tommy John surgery will knock him out for next season. The Mets did exercise a club option on Brooks Raley, which I'm great to have him back. 3-1 last season, 2.45 ERA, 25 strikeouts in 25 and 2/3 innings pitched. Coming off that Tommy John surgery, he re-signed with the Mets at the end of April, returned in July, and he was just what the doctor ordered, especially after losing AJ Minter and Danny Young. The Mets really had no lefties. They went out, they got Gregory Soto, Brooks Raley out there. Jose Castillo pitched a little bit. So having Brooks Raley back is going to be great. And another reliever from the Rays a couple years ago. So we talked about that earlier. They declined the club option on Drew Smith. His Mets career right now over. They may try to re-sign him in a different type of way, but for right now, they declined the club option on Drew Smith. He's a free agent. His Mets career 12-13, 3.48 ERA, had 5 saves and 202 strikeouts in 196 1/3 innings pitched. This is his second Tommy John surgery. Second. It just feels like it just feels like these guys are prone. These pitchers are always prone to be having Tommy John surgery. The Mets did make a trade with the Rays. We mentioned Stearns loving the Rays. They traded for right-handed pitcher Joey Gerber from the Rays for cash considerations. Career 3.60 ERA in 20 innings pitched in the major leagues. Mets also signed Brandon Waddell, 1-year major league contract. He had a 3.45 ERA in 11 appearances last season. We mentioned Luis Castillo. He returns. He was claimed off waivers from the Baltimore Orioles last season. 1-1, 2.35 ERA, 19 strikeouts in 15 and a thirds innings pitched. Nice to have that relief depth to go along with Brooks Raley and a returning AJ Minter. Outfielder Ji-Hwan Bae claimed off waivers from the Pittsburgh Pirates. Career 233 batting average, but last season batted way below the Mendoza line, .50, and had a 290 OPS in 20 at-bats. I don't have much to say on that signing. And Nick Madrigal, elected free agency. Never even got into a game this season. Hurt in one of the first couple spring training games, was done for the season. Just as useful as Jed Lowry was for the New York Mets. So there you have it on the roster moves that the Mets have made. Going back to some of your chat comments here. Blunt Thoughts, Hector saying, did you hear Keith say on the show with Heyman and Sherman that he's never been asked to work with Pete or anyone really? Only guy he worked with was Hundley, and that's terrible. Yeah. I don't know why they don't have Keith be more of an influence, especially with how good he was defensively. I'm surprised by that. G-Money Stack saying, yes, it hurts that Antoan Richardson left the New York Mets for Atlanta Braves. He wanted a bigger role and more money. And that is leading us into our next topic of this morning. And that is Antoan Richardson and Jeremy Hefner joining the Braves staff. Now, I don't really care about Jeremy Hefner. We all know my stance on Jeremy Hefner and the work that he's done. He will be the pitching coach. Richardson will be the first base coach. So they're both making lateral moves here. But I'm going to ask you to the start right off the bat here. Is losing Antoan Richardson as big of a deal as some are making it out to be? A lot of fans are upset on X that he went to Atlanta. Then again, he's just your first base coach. Some people upset, some people don't care. Here are some of the comments Richardson made to, I think it was the New York Post and to the media. Mike Puma had some of it. Anthony Tacoma had some of it. So during the negotiation process, we weren't fully aligned on how we viewed my value. I have great respect for their process and the conversations we had. This narrative of me not wanting to be a Met, that's kind of bogus. Once I was allowed to speak with other teams, I remained open to return to Queens until the end, while also focusing on finding an opportunity that was more in line with what I was looking for. I had a proposed salary with benefits included. The Mets had a proposed salary with benefits included. We differed on the salary part of it. Now, Mike Puma added this towards the end. Richardson circled back to the Mets at the end, but the team couldn't offer the same deal as originally been offered because of a restriction on the number of coaches allowed to receive a pension. The Mets had already hired other coaches before Richardson circled back. So what are your thoughts on that? Mark Cesare saying, well, he was more than just a first base coach with the Mets, and that's true. He really changed the way that these guys ran the bases. They were one of the best teams at stealing, right? Juan Soto had his best career year stealing bases by a long shot. 38 stolen bases. But is Richardson more important to you than getting the pitching coach and the hitting coach right? Richardson helped out a lot because, obviously Eric Chavez could not get these guys hit with runners in scoring position. I mean, I know he doesn't hit for them, but their viewpoint on how to hit with runners in scoring position never changed at all this season. They were bad from beginning to end, except for 1 month in August. And that was it. Carlos Ramos saying, just like losing Joey Cora at third base was also detrimental to our base running game. Absolutely. Look at who we had at third base these past couple of years. Mets had a tough time scoring runs, and some interesting decisions were made with Mike Sarbaugh. Marcos Figueroa is saying, all Richardson wanted was more money. That is business malpractice. They should have offered him the money and benefits from the jump. Maybe if they would have got this done a lot earlier, then he would not have left. Get your coaches that you already have on the payroll done and figured out earlier, and then move on from there. Carlos Ortiz saying Richardson played his hand and lost. Carlos Ramos saying, I think it's equal. Marcos Figueroa saying, but he shouldn't have lost. Mets should have respected the value he brought to the team. And G Money Stack saying, yeah, stealing bases is very important to winning games. Richardson was very important to the New York Mets. Honestly, it won't be the same without him. And now he goes to Atlanta, a rival team. I think that's the big problem. Right? He's going to Atlanta now. If he would have went to some other team, I feel like people wouldn't be as upset. But because he's going to Atlanta, it tends to be a little worse, right? And Hector saying definitely didn't understand letting Joey Cora walk, though I think he really wanted to leave. David Stearns, every move that he makes moving forward, following this collapse from this team, every move is going to be microscoped. Every move that he makes, no matter what, moving forward. And it goes all the way to the coaching staff as well. Every move that he makes moving forward. And especially now, as we start to settle into this David Stearns era, and David Stearns finally gets all the people that he wants, right? Because he inherited most of the coaching staff outside of Carlos Mendoza, who he hired. Eric Chavez, Jeremy Barnes, Jeremy Hefner. I think he did bring in Antoan Richardson and Mike Sarbaugh. But there are some guys he just didn't bring in. Some players and even the farm system. David Stearns is trying to reimagine this team in the image that he wants it to be in. And we'll see if this works out. Because if this team does not make the postseason for a second straight year with Juan Soto on the roster, Francisco Lindor, you got Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo's not chopped liver. This team needs to get better, and they need to make the postseason. There's no excuse. Absolutely none. I don't want to hear anything when this season ends. We were not, we were reactionary. We were reactive when it came to signing. I don't want to hear any of this stuff anymore. This season, David Stearns needs to get it right. He's got to get it right. M-Easy saying he's not tripping on losing Richardson. Carlos Ramos said, I meant equal to your question of if Richardson is equally important to hitting coach and pitching coach, which, yes. Marcos Figueroa is saying Stearns overthinks things. Smart people tend to do that. That's why me, a high school graduate, manages a bunch of lawyers. I bring street smarts and common sense. Those two should never be underestimated. Lane Kerner saying, who do the Mets sign in the offseason? I still don't know what the game plan is, right? I don't know who they sign in the offseason. Let's go with what positions of need they need, right? They need a starting pitcher, an ace. Forget about, thirds, fourths, fifths in the rotation. They need an ace. They need a first baseman. They need a center fielder. Those are the three areas that they can make moves on. If they decide, it also depends on what they want to do with Brett Beatty and those plethora of infielders they have. Could they sign someone for third base? Akamoto's there, right? Bregman's there. So the most important needs right now, starting pitching, I didn't say relief pitching, which should be in there as well. Relief pitching, first base, center field. Boom. That's what they need. Duran Rivera, I think the Mets have to change the culture of the team. When they had JD Martinez and Iglesias, they took a lot of pressure off the team and took young players like Vientos under their wing. You're talking about culture change. A lot of people talking about culture change. Maybe they do. G Money Stacks saying, let's hope that the New York Mets don't get overmatched by other teams in 2026. Well, they got a lot of work to do in this offseason to make sure that that doesn't happen. A lot of work. They need a new bullpen. They need a ace in the rotation, first base, outfield, mostly center. Hector, and all eyes on Stearns like a microscope right now. He needs to show he can operate a big market team, a team with a big budget and bigger expectations. Absolutely. Absolutely. All eyes are on him. And he's got a lot of work. He has a lot more work to do now than he did last offseason. A lot more work. Patty in NYC saying 100% to y'all in the comments. Stearns should be watched because the needs aren't difficult unless he makes it difficult. That's the thing too, right? Like, let's say he lets Edwin Diaz go and doesn't re-sign him. Well, now they need a closer on top of needing a whole new bullpen, a first baseman, an ace, and an outfielder. Don't make this hard on yourself. Don't make this hard on yourself, Stearns. Stearnsy. Don't make it hard on yourself. I always like to wrap up the show with some news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, and we're going to do that right now. Juan Soto and Pete Alonso, Silver Slugger winners this season 5 times. This is the 5th time for Juan Soto. This is the first time for Pete Alonso. Juan Soto was also named a National League MVP finalist alongside Shohei Ohtani and Kyle Schwarber. This season for Juan Soto was probably the best season statistically. Let me quote that. In his career, 263 batting average, 43 homers, 105 RBIs, 38 stolen bases, and a 921 OPS. My view on this whole situation is that he's not going to win, right? It's going to go to Ohtani, who hit over 50 home runs. It'll go to Schwarber, who hit over 50 home runs. I don't think it's going to be Juan Soto. I think Francisco Lindor was more deserving in 2024 for what he did. And his stats weren't as great as these statistically. But he meant more to that team in 2024 and getting them to the postseason than Juan Soto did this year. He started off, struggled, could not hit with runners in scoring position. Then finally, figured out how to hit his home runs again and RBIs. But by that time, the team was it was too late to try to turn this team around, and they could not make it to the postseason. So Juan Soto will not be your MVP this season. We also finally got a spring training schedule, and I want to bring that up here for you guys to see. The Mets posted their spring training schedule this season. Boom! Start off on February 21st against the Miami Marlins at home in Port St. Lucie. They'll play the Yankees twice. They are also going to play Nicaragua as well as Israel as the WBC comes this season. And I don't know who's going to be a part of the WBC or not. I do enjoy the WBC, and I do enjoy watching it, and I probably will be watching it, sure. But that's the Mets spring training schedule for this season coming up. Now, one more thing I wanted to get into. I don't know if you guys saw this on MLB Network. It was on their Hot Stove show. hosted by Harold Reynolds and Matt Veskursion. But a trade was predicted. A trade of Tariq Skubal to the Mets by Lauren Shahadi. Now, Harold Reynolds laughed at it, and Matt asked, what do the Mets have, only citing Ronnie Mauricio as a Mets prospect. The Mets have a top 5 farm system. And I like Matt Vasgersian, but dude, you got to do your research, bro. The Mets have a top 5 farm system in all of baseball right now. It's not middling. ESPN had him at number 1. How do you not know some of these guys that are coming up? And some of them came up already this year. Ronnie Mauricio is probably not even top 5 or top 6 at this point in time. So you can't laugh off the Mets getting him and being super surprised, not knowing the farm system. And I'll admit, I don't know the ins and out of the farm system that the Mets have. And I'm a Mets fan. That's why I have guys like Ernest Dove on here. That's why I have Joe DeMayo on here. But man, do your research, brother. Get with the program. Get with the program. Especially, the Matt Veskursion is, you hear him on the games, you hear him doing the calls, and now he's got these shit like, come on, man. You got these, sometimes even on ESPN, these guys don't know what's going on. Like, are the producers doing all the work for these guys? Like, gotta be better. Gotta be better. All right, guys, that wraps up today's Subway to Shea podcast. I really appreciate every single one of you for tuning into the show, for being part of it. Next week, we will not have a Sunday morning show at 10. There's no show. I don't know if we're going to reschedule it for some time or just postpone it to the following Sunday. I will have more information on that for you as the days wind down. But as of right now, next Sunday's show is not happening at 10. We will figure out maybe we do an evening show. Maybe we'll do something during the week, but it's just not going to be next Sunday at 10. So stay tuned. I'll have more stuff for you on X, and I'll let you know what changes there. But I really appreciate every single one of you for being a part of this show. 167 people in the room today. Shout out to the chat. Every single one of you provided great comments, great questions, great information. Make sure you follow Subway to Shea on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me on X at AntRivera86, as you see below. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Support the Subway to Shea podcast with super thanks, super chat, super stickers. That's all available there for YouTube for you guys. Appreciate every single one of you for being a part of this show. It's always great talking with you on a Sunday. We'll do it again. Not next Sunday, but we will do it again at some point, whether it's the following Sunday or, during the week. And I maybe this is a way to get the Mets to sign somebody. Obviously, when I can't do the show, the Mets will sign someone and make a big deal. So we'll see if that happens. But for Anthony Rivera, for the Subway to Shea podcast, thank you everyone for watching. And always remember, let's go Mets.